Okay, so the first thing that we're going to take a look at are circuit breakers. So on a circuit breaker, anytime you see a solid red square, that means that the circuit breaker is closed and energized. A hollow green square means that the circuit breaker is open and energized. In Power Simulator, anytime you see anything that's white, that's an indication that it is de-energized. Of course, the exception to that, because to every rule there must be an exception, are generators. Generators will always show as white. However, I can see that there is obviously an output from that unit, and I can see that the bus it's attached to is in fact colorized green, showing that it is energized at 25 kV. So to operate a circuit breaker, you simply left-click on it, and that will bring up that breaker's control window. So from here, this will tell me the breaker that I'm looking at and the station that I'm in. So I'm looking at Mount Vernon Breaker 2, and it is currently closed. If I tried to hit close now, I would simply get a note on the event log window saying that it was unable to change the state of the breaker because it can't close any more than it already is. My other option is I can open the breaker, or I can simply hit cancel to close the window out. So if I want to open breaker 2, I simply click open. I give it a second for it to implement. I see the breaker come open, and I see my line flow go to 0. So remember that anytime you take an action, you always want to verify that that action occurred. So in order to close the breaker, most of the time it's quite easy. I simply left click, I select close, and I see the breaker comes close, and I see I have flow on my line once again. Now there are a specific set of tolerances that must be met in order to close a breaker regarding the voltage, frequency, and angle on either side of it. When you're tying islands together, for example, and we'll get into that, your rotating angle has to be within a specific tolerance, but just for normal operations, you have to, the voltage tolerance for closing a breaker is 30%, the frequency tolerance is 0.1 hertz, and the standing angle is 40 degrees. So those are global set points across the entire system, so no one will be any different from another. The voltage one in particular might come into play when if you're doing a restoration, or if you're tying islands back together. It's very easy to forget the voltage aspect, particularly when you're tying islands and you're focused so much on frequency. So just remember that the set points they're quite generous because this is on a training platform, so we really don't want people to mess up. We want them to do well. So the other function of a circuit breaker, besides its open and close, is the synchroscope. So all breakers in Power Simulator are equipped with a synchroscope. That's not exactly the reflection of real life, but we want, again, because we're on a training platform, we want folks to have the opportunity to get all of that information that they can from anywhere in the system. So to bring up the synchroscope window, I simply select, we're going to do breaker 5. No, let's do breaker 2 again. I simply right-click on the breaker and I select synchroscope. This will bring up the synchroscope window, and it gives me similar information to the breaker's control window. I see the breaker name, I see its current state, but the difference is I actually see a computerized version of a synchroscope, as well as the voltage and frequency values on each side of the breaker. Now, because the breaker is closed, they're the same. So let's go ahead and open that up, and let's see if anything changes. Okay, so because my system is still tied together, all I did was open and align. I didn't separate an island. My frequency will obviously be the same on both sides, but you can see that the voltage is only slightly different. So this is still well within our 30% tolerance. So if I want to, I can simply close that breaker back in. Now you'll notice when I give a close command on the synchroscope window, it can take slightly longer to implement than the control window, so just be patient. There might be a delay, but that's all right. Now, if for some reason you give a close command to a breaker, either from the synchroscope or from the regular control window, and if it does not come closed, the first thing you should do is check the event log. If the breaker for some reason did not close, there would be a message on the event log explaining why. So it would say that either the voltage tolerance was too great, or excuse me, the voltage difference was too great, or the frequency difference was too great, so the breaker cannot close. So anytime something does not happen the way that you expect it to, check the event log window, and then recheck your system state to be sure that it is exactly where you want it to be. One thing about the simulator is the simulator does not lie. So if it's not doing what you expect it to, chances are there's something operationally that's not quite right.